Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. For more on where national security stands 15 years after the attacks of 9/11, we're joined by CBS News senior national security analyst and former Homeland Security Advisor to President George W. Bush, Fran Townsend. Stephen Brill contributes to The Atlantic and is the author of this month's cover story, Are We Any Safer? And Jeffrey Goldberg writes for The Atlantic, and he's also a visiting fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Steve, I want to start with you. You worked for a year on this article, Are We Any Safer? And so I apologize, but I'll ask you if you can boil it down in an answer.
Only 20 words.
Yes, right.
Exactly. Well, we're a lot stronger because of the work that people like Fran did and tens of thousands of others, and the $1 trillion we spent. We strengthened our defenses, but the nature of the threat has changed and evolved in a way that arguably in many ways makes us less safe.
And Fran, are we adapting to that environment that Steve describes?
You'll appreciate, John, what happens is we never adapt fast enough, and that's always a concern. And so, as you heard from the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, the threat has metastasized and spread. We have more bad guys in more different places now. And that's a significant threat. And you add to that the internet and the radicalization that happens over the internet. We've been very late to that game as a government across two administrations, frankly. And that's a problem. We don't treat the internet as a battle space as we do land, air, and sea.
Jeffrey, go ahead, Steve.
Let me just add that there are some old kinds of threats that we could deal with. Because the threat has evolved to lone wolves, people acting independently, the one thing that one of the political parties doesn't seem to want to do when it comes to Homeland Security is do what most other countries do, which is keep assault weapons, military weapons, away from terrorists. I mean, that is one easy way to adapt that doesn't cost us money and that is logical and that works.
Jeffrey, let me ask you on this broader question. Barack Obama came into office with a certain set of challenges. In terms of the Are We Any Safer question, what does Barack Obama leave for his successor on that question?
Right. So Barack Obama came in with what he would refer to as a very messy barn. He was handed a global economic crisis, 180,000 troops in Afghanistan and Iraq, bin Laden alive, and he's been preoccupied, and his administration has been preoccupied with handing off to his successor a, quote, clean barn. The barn is not that clean, unfortunately. You have vast ungoverned spaces, even though ISIS is being rolled back in Iraq and Syria to some degree. You have ISIS, an organization that didn't even exist when he became president, new forms of terrorism. On the other hand, you have to say this, and you say this about George W. Bush too, after 9/11, it's somewhat miraculous, but we have not had a 9/11 sized terror attack in the United States. And I do think that's somewhat miraculous given how far behind we were. So he is not handing off a perfect situation to his successor, but it is a manageable situation still, I think.
Well, it is miraculous, but the miracle didn't just happen. It's because of the work that lots and lots of people did to make it happen. I think we ought to acknowledge that today.
Steve, let me ask you, you write in your piece, our imagination is limited to the day's headlines. Policymakers fight the war that made those headlines, not the war that might come next. You mentioned assault weapons. That is something that's been in the headlines. That is something people have talked about and debated. But what's not in the headlines that people should be thinking about?
Well, let's take something that was very much in the headlines right after 9/11, the bioterror threat, the anthrax attacks. That is, if anything, more of a threat today than it was 15 years ago, but we've done nothing to develop the technology that could really detect that kind of attack because it just happened to fall out of the headlines.
Fran, what do you think of that?
Well, I think in fairness, across the WMD spectrum, whether you're talking about radiological, nuclear, or chemical, we have taken different pieces of that and addressed it. We haven't done it in the comprehensive way that Steve's talking about. Part of that is what I call the tyranny of the inbox. You know, no president plans on Katrina, no president plans on 9/11. And so the distraction of the everyday, the crisis, takes away from the more strategic planning that needs to be done. I do think, I come back to this, we can't kill our way out of this problem, no matter how much progress we've made in killing bin Laden and other leaders. The fact is you've got to address the ideology, and I don't think we've done an adequate job, nor have we spent the adequate resources against that problem.
Jeffrey, getting to that question of ideology, you talked about ungoverned spaces.
Yeah.
During the immediate aftermath of 9/11, there was a lot of talk about we have to get them over there or they'll come over here. Right. What's the state of that argument? Is that still useful? Is it still the worry?
I mean, it's a useful framework to talk about this, but to add to what Steve is saying, if you have a lone wolf problem and if you have an internet problem, you have a self-radicalization through the internet, then the people we're fighting are often people in the United States who don't even know at this moment that they haven't been radicalized yet. And so, going to what Fran is talking about, this is the danger. We are safer in a sort of broad bureaucratic way. That our defenses have been strengthened. We spent $1 trillion strengthening those defenses, but we have no answer yet for the ideologies that radicalize people right here at home, and that is the danger. We are both safer and more unsafe at the same time. It's not a satisfying answer, but I think it's the correct answer.
I'm glad you didn't write my headline.
Sorry, we have a little bit of news here. I'm going to interrupt that Hillary Clinton left the events at Ground Zero unexpectedly today. The campaign says she felt overheated and went to her daughter's apartment and is feeling much better. But a person briefed on the matter tells CBS News that it appears she fainted when she got into her vehicle. We'll keep you updated as we learn more. Steve, I want to go back to you on this question of the tyranny of the inbox. You've studied a lot of complicated systems, whether it's in Homeland Security here or the New York school systems. Let's find some, is there optimism? In other words, in a system where there's tyranny of the inbox, you talked to Jay Johnson, and he said, we've got to prioritize and risks. Is there a way to break out of that tyranny of the inbox?
Well, you have to have the capacity to take a step back at the same time that you're worried about what's in your inbox. And I think that increasingly from 9/11 on, the Bush administration made all kinds of management improvements as they learned. The Obama administration, I think, has done a much better job. Jay Johnson seems to be the one secretary who is finally getting his arms around the management of this agency. But it is really hard because when you're dealing with a situation where at any moment you can have an emergency that you have to pay attention to, to have someone writing an article in the Atlantic saying, hey, you should worry about dirty bombs because they're really a potential threat, and what you're looking at is that morning's intel briefing that tells you exactly what that threat is that day. That's a hard thing to balance.
Fran, finally to you on the social media piece. You said not enough is being done. Is there, if I were coming in and I were president, what's your recommendation that I do right away?
Look at what we spend on our military and on the physical battle space to go after the ungoverned and poorly governed spaces, and then look at what you're spending to combat it on the internet. The answer is it's so disproportionate. You've got to really make the commitment that this is a battle space that you're going to fight to control and fight to win in terms of the ideology, and if you're not going to spend it there, you're not going to win there.
But what would you spend it on?
Oh, it's across a spectrum of things. You have both defensive operations and offensive operations. Some of it is covert, some of it is overt. You need to have the full spectrum.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Thanks to all of you, and we'll be right back with our political panel.